For 12 years I'd been the family's quiet financial supporter. While my sister Melissa lived her dream life as a social media influencer with 50,000 followers and zero income, I worked 70-hour weeks building my consulting firm from the ground up. Every family emergency, every unexpected expense, every temporary financial crisis somehow became my responsibility to solve. The pattern was always the same. Mom would call with that particular tone in her voice, half pleading, half demanding, and explain how the family needed money. Dad's medical bills, Melissa's car repairs, the roof that needed fixing, grandmother's funeral expenses. I'd wire the money without question, sometimes from my personal savings, sometimes from my business account. Over the years, I'd quietly transferred over $180,000 to keep the family afloat. Never once did they ask about my business. Never once did they inquire about my financial situation or whether I could afford these constant requests. To them, I was simply the family ATM, successful enough to have money available, but not successful enough to be considered truly important. Melissa was the star, the golden child who'd make it big someday with her lifestyle content. I was just the reliable workhorse who paid the bills. The requests became more frequent after I purchased my downtown office building 2 years ago. Somehow owning property made them assume I had unlimited funds. What they didn't know was that I'd been strategically acquiring assets through shell companies for years. The building purchase was just the tip of the iceberg. 6 months ago I'd finally reached a major milestone. My consulting firm had grown to the point where a private equity group approached me about a partnership. They wanted to invest $40,000 for a 15% stake in the company, money I planned to use for expanding our technology infrastructure and hiring 2 additional consultants. It represented everything I'd worked toward for over a decade. I made the mistake of mentioning the investment during Sunday dinner at my parents' house. The family was gathered around the table and I thought sharing my good news would finally earn me some recognition. Instead, Melissa immediately launched into complaints about her financial struggles. Her brand partnerships weren't paying enough. Her apartment rent had increased. She needed professional photography for her content, a new laptop, and funds to attend networking events. "It's so unfair," she whined, stabbing at her mashed potatoes. "Some people get handed everything while others have to struggle for scraps." Dad nodded sympathetically. "Melissa works so hard building her brand. It's tough out there for creative entrepreneurs." Mom chimed in with her usual refrain, "We all need to support each other. Family comes first." I listened quietly as I always did. Over the years I'd learned that arguing with their narrative was pointless. In their minds, my success was somehow accidental or inevitable, while Melissa's lack of success was due to external circumstances beyond her control. 3 weeks later I discovered the money was gone. I was reviewing my business accounts when I noticed the $40,000 withdrawal. At first I thought it was a banking error. I called my business manager, then the bank, trying to trace what had happened. The withdrawal had been made from my secondary business account, one I'd stupidly added my father as a backup signer on years ago during a medical emergency when I was traveling internationally. The money had been transferred to an account I didn't recognize. When I traced the account, I discovered it belonged to Melissa's wedding planner. My sister was getting married. The wedding I hadn't been told about. The wedding being funded with my business investment money. I sat in my office staring at the bank statements for an hour. $40,000. The money that was supposed to expand my company, hire employees, and take my business to the next level, was paying for flowers, catering, and a venue I'd never heard of. My phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. "OMG, finally booked the Riverside Manor for my October wedding. It's going to be perfect." The deposit alone was $15,000, but Dad said money shouldn't be an issue for something this important. "Can't wait for you to see it." She'd spent my money and was now bragging about it. I called Dad immediately. "Oh, you saw the withdrawal," he said casually, as if we were discussing the weather. "I meant to call you about that. Melissa found her dream venue, but they needed a deposit immediately or she'd lose it. You know how these wedding venues are. Everything books up fast." "Dad, that was my business investment money. I have a partnership agreement that requires those funds. Come on, be reasonable. It's your sister's wedding. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Your business will be fine, you're always making money. But Melissa will never get another chance at the perfect wedding." The casual dismissal of my financial needs in favor of Melissa's wants was nothing new. But this crossed a line I hadn't known existed. They'd stolen money directly from my business. Money that wasn't mine to give, money that belonged to investors who trusted me. I need that money back in the account by Friday, I said. Dad laughed. Where exactly do you think we're going to get $40,000? The deposits are already paid. The contracts are signed. Stop being dramatic about this. This isn't dramatic, Dad. This is theft. Theft? It's family support. You've been lucky with your little business, and now it's time to help your sister achieve her dreams. Stop being selfish. I hung up and immediately called Mom, hoping for a different response. Oh honey, I'm so glad Dad was able to help Melissa with the wedding costs, she said cheerfully. You should see how happy she is. She's been texting me photos of centerpieces all morning. Mom, they took money from my business account without permission. That's not family support, that's stealing. Don't be ridiculous. Your father is on that account. He has every right to use it for family emergencies. And what's more important, your sister's happiness or some business expense that can wait a few months? It's not just a business expense. I have legal obligations to investors. I could lose the partnership entirely. You're being overdramatic. Your business is doing fine. You own that big building downtown. You can afford to help your sister have the wedding she deserves. She hung up before I could explain that owning the building didn't mean I had unlimited liquid assets, or that the partnership money had already been allocated for specific business purposes. I spent the rest of the day calculating the damage. Without the $40,000, I couldn't meet the technology upgrade timeline I'd promised my new partners. I couldn't hire the consultants I'd already interviewed. Most importantly, I looked like an unreliable business partner who couldn't manage his own finances. That evening Melissa called. I heard you're upset about the wedding money, she said, her tone suggesting I was being unreasonable about a minor inconvenience. I just want you to know how grateful I am. This wedding is going to be incredible, and it's all thanks to family support. Melissa, you took money that wasn't available for a wedding. That was investment capital for my business. Oh please, your business is doing great. You're always complaining about being too busy with clients. Besides, this is my wedding. I only get to do this once, while you'll have plenty of other business opportunities. I've worked 12 years to get to this point. And I've worked just as hard building my brand. Just because your work pays more doesn't mean it's more important. Some things matter more than money. The irony of her lecturing me about values while spending my money on her luxury wedding was staggering. I need the money returned to my account. That's impossible. The deposits are paid. The venue is booked. The photographer is scheduled. Everything is set. You can't seriously expect me to cancel my wedding because you're having some business problem. It's not a business problem, Melissa. You stole money that wasn't mine to give. I didn't steal anything. Dad transferred the money. If you have a problem with it, take it up with him. But don't try to ruin my wedding over some accounting issue. She hung up, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried every reasonable approach to resolve the situation. I offered payment plans, suggested the family take out a loan to repay the money, even proposed that I could help with wedding costs from my personal funds if they returned the business investment. Every suggestion was met with the same response. I was being selfish, unreasonable, and cruel to prioritize business over family. Meanwhile, Melissa's social media filled with wedding planning content. Photos of flower arrangements, dress fittings, and venue tours, all funded with money stolen from my business. Her followers commented with congratulations and excitement, completely unaware that her dream wedding was being financed through theft. The breaking point came when my business partner called to discuss the delayed technology implementation. We're concerned about the timeline, he said. The infrastructure upgrades were supposed to begin last week. Our investors are expecting to see progress reports by month end. I had to explain that the funds were temporarily unavailable due to a family emergency. It was humiliating. I'd built my reputation on reliability and professional competence, and now I looked like someone who couldn't manage basic business finances. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I called the bank. Not the branch where my family did their personal banking, but the corporate headquarters. I requested a meeting with the senior vice president, citing urgent business matters requiring executive attention. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. I spent the weekend preparing documentation, bank statements showing the unauthorized withdrawal, the investment agreement requiring the $40,000 by specific dates, and records of every family financial request I'd honored over the past 12 years. Monday morning, I dressed in my best suit and drove to the bank's downtown headquarters. The senior vice president, Janet Morrison, greeted me in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the city. "Thank you for making time to see me," I said, placing a folder on the table between us. "I have a situation involving unauthorized access to business funds, and I'd like to discuss the bank's policies regarding account security." She opened the folder and began reviewing the documents. Her expression grew more serious with each page. "This appears to be a significant unauthorized withdrawal from your business account," she said. "Has this been reported to authorities?" "Not yet. The unauthorized signer is my father, and the beneficiary is my sister. I'm hoping to resolve this through internal channels before involving law enforcement." She nodded thoughtfully. "I see. And you're seeking the bank's assistance in recovering these funds?" "Actually," I said, reaching into my briefcase for a second folder, "I'm here in my capacity as the majority stakeholder of Morrison Financial Holdings." I placed the second folder on the table. Janet's eyes widened as she opened it and saw the corporate structure documents, stock certificates, and financial statements showing my controlling interest in the bank's parent company. Morrison Financial Holdings own not just the bank where my family kept their accounts, but also the mortgage company that held their home loan, the credit card company that issued their cards, and the investment firm that managed their retirement accounts. I acquired my majority position through a series of shell company purchases over the past 5 years, I explained calmly. The board isn't aware of my identity as the controlling shareholder. I've preferred to remain anonymous and allow professional management to run operations. Janet stared at the documents, then at me, clearly processing the implications. "So when you called about account security issues?" "I called as a customer seeking resolution for theft from my business account. But as the majority owner, I have additional options for addressing this situation." I leaned back in my chair, maintaining the same calm demeanor I'd shown during every family conversation about money. "I'd like to implement immediate account security measures for all Morrison Financial Holdings customers who have demonstrated unauthorized use of shared account access. This would include freezing accounts pending verification of transaction authority, reviewing all recent transfers for potential fraud, and requiring in-person verification for any future large withdrawals." Janet nodded slowly. "That's certainly within policy parameters for fraud prevention. I'd also like to review the loan and credit portfolio for customers whose accounts show irregular large expenditures that might indicate financial distress or inability to meet ongoing obligations." She understood immediately. "Of course, we have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure our customers aren't overextending themselves financially." "Perfect. Could we implement these security measures this afternoon?" "Absolutely. I'll have our security team begin the review process immediately." I stood and shook her hand. "Thank you for your time, Janet. I appreciate the bank's commitment to customer security and responsible lending practices." Walking back to my car, I felt a strange sense of calm. For 12 years, I'd enabled my family's financial irresponsibility by quietly covering their mistakes and absorbing their crises. Today that pattern ended. I drove back to my office and spent the afternoon working on client projects, the same focused productivity that had built my consulting firm from nothing into a multimillion-dollar enterprise. Around 3 p.m. my phone started ringing. The first call was from Dad. "What did you do?" he demanded without preamble. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Our bank accounts are frozen. All of them. Checking, savings, the credit cards. Everything. They say there's a security review for potential fraudulent activity." "That sounds serious. Have you done anything that might trigger fraud detection?" "Of course not. This is obviously about the wedding money. You called the bank and reported us for theft." "I reported unauthorized use of my business account, which is what happened." "It wasn't unauthorized. I'm on that account." "You're on that account for emergencies when I'm traveling internationally, not to fund weddings." "This is ridiculous. You're destroying the family over money." "I'm protecting my business from theft. The bank is protecting its customers from potential fraud." These seem like reasonable responses to the situation. Dad hung up, but the phone rang again within minutes. This time it was Mom. "Please tell me you're not really doing this to us," she said, her voice shaking. "The bank froze everything. They want documentation for every large transaction from the past 6 months. They're reviewing our mortgage for irregularities. Mom, banks have security protocols. If there's been unusual account activity, they're required to investigate. You know this isn't about security. This is revenge because we helped Melissa with her wedding. This is about $40,000 being stolen from my business account. The bank is treating it as the financial crime it actually is. We're family. You can't treat family like criminals. Family doesn't steal money from each other's businesses." He hung up crying. The third call came an hour later. "Melissa, you're insane," she screamed into the phone. "You're absolutely insane. The wedding venue called. Our deposit check bounced. The photographer canceled. The caterer wants cash up front. You're destroying my wedding. Your wedding was being funded with stolen money, Melissa." "It wasn't stolen. Dad moved money between family accounts. From my business account to pay for your personal wedding expenses. That's the definition of theft. I'm going to the police. I'm reporting you for harassment and financial abuse." "Please do. I'd love to see you explain to police how I'm abusing you by reporting the theft of my own money." She hung up screaming obscenities. By Wednesday the calls had stopped. I later learned that all 3 of them had spent Tuesday at the bank, trying to resolve the account freezes. They'd been required to provide documentation for every large transaction from the past year, explain the source of funds for the wedding deposits, and demonstrate their ability to meet existing loan obligations without the irregular transfers from my accounts. The mortgage review had revealed that they'd been using my periodic gifts to meet their monthly payment obligations for over 2 years. Without those transfers, their debt-to-income ratio exceeded the bank's lending standards. They were required to either provide proof of adequate income or begin immediate proceedings to sell the house. The credit card review showed similar patterns. Multiple large purchases followed by minimum payments, then sudden large transfers from my accounts to pay down the balances. Without my financial support, they were carrying debt they couldn't service. Thursday morning, Janet Morrison called me directly. "I wanted to give you an update on the security review," she said. "We've identified substantial irregularities in the affected accounts. The customers will need to demonstrate legitimate income sources for all recent large transactions and provide collateral for existing loans that are now considered high risk." "What does that mean practically?" "They'll need to either pay down their outstanding balances to acceptable levels or provide additional collateral. Given the pattern of dependency on external transfers, we can't consider those transfers reliable income for underwriting purposes." "I see. And the business account situation?" "We've recovered approximately $15,000 of the unauthorized transfer. The remaining $25,000 was spent on non-refundable deposits that appear to constitute a total loss." I thanked her and hung up. $25,000. Gone forever, spent on a wedding that would never happen. The irony wasn't lost on me. Friday afternoon, I was working late when my office security called to announce visitors. Dad and Mom were in the lobby requesting a meeting. I had them escorted to the conference room. They looked exhausted. Dad's face was gray and Mom had clearly been crying. They sat across from me at the polished table where I normally met with clients and investors. "We need to talk," Dad said quietly. "I'm listening." "The bank is foreclosing on the house. They want the full mortgage balance within 30 days or we have to sell." I nodded but said nothing. "Our credit cards are canceled. The bank says we've been living beyond our means and they can't extend additional credit." And I waited. "Melissa's wedding is canceled. Everything. The venue, the photographer, the caterer. She's devastated." "I'm sorry to hear that." Dad leaned forward. "You have to know we never meant for this to happen. We thought you had plenty of money. The building, the business, all those client payments. We didn't realize taking the $40,000 would cause such problems. Dad, you've taken over $180,000 from me in the past 12 years. $40,000 wasn't the problem, it was the final problem." Mom spoke up for the first time. "We didn't know you were keeping track." "I wasn't keeping track for revenge. I was keeping track because that's what responsible people do with money. Every dollar that left my accounts was money I couldn't use for business growth, investment opportunities, or my own financial security. We thought you were just successful, Dad said helplessly. We thought you had more than enough. I am successful. Because I work 70-hour weeks, because I make careful financial decisions, and because I don't spend money I don't have on things I don't need. The money you've been taking was my success, transferred to subsidize your lifestyle choices. They sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Mom asked the question I'd been expecting. What do you want us to do? I want you to learn to live within your means. I want you to get jobs that pay enough to cover your expenses. I want you to stop assuming that family means unlimited access to other people's money. But what about the house? What about our retirement? What about Melissa's future? Those are your responsibilities to figure out. I'm 29 years old. I've been supporting a family of 4 since I was 22. I'm done. Dad tried one more approach. If you help us get through this crisis, we promise things will be different. We'll pay you back gradually. We'll stop asking for money. You've promised that before. After the roof repair. After grandmother's funeral. After Melissa's car accident. Every crisis ends with promises that are forgotten as soon as the next crisis begins. I stood up, signaling the meeting was over. I love you both. I hope you find a way to build sustainable lives. But I won't be part of the solution anymore. They left without another word. 6 months later, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Melissa was marrying her fiancé in a small ceremony at the local community center. The invitation was printed on basic cardstock, not the elegant calligraphy she'd originally planned. There was no mention of expensive flowers, professional photography, or gourmet catering. I sent a gift. A modest check that represented what I could afford as a normal wedding guest, not as the family financial supporter. The thank you note I received was different from any communication I'd had with Melissa in years. It was handwritten, genuine, and included an apology for the previous year's events. She'd gotten a full-time job at a marketing agency. Her social media content now focused on budget-friendly lifestyle tips rather than luxury aspirations. She seemed, for the first time I could remember, genuinely happy rather than constantly frustrated by what she couldn't afford. My parents sold their house and bought a modest apartment. Dad found work as a part-time financial advisor. Ironic, given his own financial management history, but apparently his crisis had taught him valuable lessons about living within one's means. Mom returned to nursing, a career she'd abandoned 20 years earlier to focus on supporting Melissa's creative development. As for me, I used the crisis as motivation to accelerate my business growth. The partnership that had been delayed by the stolen $40,000 was eventually restructured as a full acquisition. The consulting firm that had started as a one-person operation now employed 15 people and generated annual revenue in the 8-figure range. More importantly, I learned to set boundaries that protected both my financial resources and my emotional energy. Family support became planned, budgeted assistance rather than crisis-driven emergency transfers. I help when I can afford it, not when I'm guilted into it. The Morrison Financial Holdings ownership remained my secret. The bank continued operating under professional management, serving customers throughout the region with enhanced fraud detection and responsible lending practices. My former family members eventually qualified for new accounts and credit products by demonstrating stable income and reasonable spending patterns. Sometimes I wonder if I could have handled the situation differently, found a way to teach the lesson without such dramatic consequences. But then I remember the casual entitlement in Dad's voice when he explained why he'd taken my money, the complete dismissal of my financial needs in favor of Melissa's wants, and the 12 years of quiet resentment I'd accumulated while enabling their irresponsibility. The hardest part wasn't the financial loss or even the family conflict. The hardest part was accepting that people I loved had viewed me as a resource to be exploited rather than a person with my own dreams and goals worth respecting. But the most surprising part was discovering that setting boundaries didn't destroy the family relationships. It eventually improved them. When interactions were no longer based on financial dependency and resentment, we could actually enjoy each other's company. Holiday dinners became pleasant rather than stressful. Phone calls were about life updates rather than financial emergencies. 6 months after the wedding invitation, I received another piece of mail from Melissa. A business plan for a marketing consultancy she wanted to start with her own savings and a small business loan. She wasn't asking for money or connections. She was asking for advice from someone who'd successfully built a company from scratch. I spent 3 hours reviewing her plan and providing detailed feedback. For the first time in our adult lives, I was helping her pursue a goal rather than enabling her to avoid responsibility. That felt like real family support. Today my business continues growing. I own properties in 3 states, employ people who depend on my company for their livelihoods, and serve clients who trust my judgment with their most important projects. None of that would have been possible if I'd continued allowing family guilt to override business sense. The $25,000 I lost to Melissa's canceled wedding was expensive tuition in a course I should have taken years earlier. How to distinguish between love and exploitation. It was worth every dollar.